our knees. We need to fall on our knees.
Good evening. Hope everything is going well. Years ago, when I was preaching in the Austin area, there was a man came to live in that area named Philip Morrison, and he was a retired preacher, and he and I got to be friends. We would ride together to preachers' luncheons, and sometimes we just do lunch together, and I just used to bounce ideas off of him and see what he thought. I don't know, it was just nice as a younger preacher to talk to an older man and get his take on things and see about life. Anyway, I treasure those times with him. It was always great to be able to visit with him. And he started sending out some email, I guess you'd say email devotionals. And so I was on that email list to get those. And I thought for this Wednesday evening, I would share this one with you with a few comments of my own. It's one called Life is Beautiful. It says, is the cross of Christ the ugliest or the most beautiful object in all history? The answer depends on one's perspective. Rough, nail-scarred, blood-stained wood, symbolizing every wrong, every injustice, every indignity one could imagine. How could it be described as anything but ugly? But, on the other hand, because it symbolizes God's love for his people and represents the ultimate sacrifice freely given, how could it be described as anything but beautiful? People who wear crucifixes don't seem to be able to resolve this question. Some wear rough, crude emblems of his suffering, while others wear precious metal, jewel-encrusted symbols of his sacrifice. Whether it's made of rough wood or precious metal, I'll argue for the beauty of the cross. On the Sunday after my father had died on a Saturday, I was grieving for my loss and rejoicing in his victory. When I spoke to a man at church who had left the best of his body and mind on a battlefield in Korea, he told me how sad he was because his dog had died the day before. My first reaction was resentment. My dad and your dog. Come on. Then I realized how truly alone my friend was and how completely surrounded by friends and family I was. Life is beautiful. Matt Dawson could have retired to a comfortable pension years earlier, but at age 78, he was still driving his 1985 Ford Escort, living in a one-bedroom apartment and still driving a forklift at Ford Motor Company where he worked for 59 years. He even worked overtime to boost his earnings. Why? So he could add to the more than $1 million he had given to schools and charities since 1994. Not bad for a guy who dropped out of school in the 7th grade. Life is beautiful. Sarah Andrews was just a teenager when she asked her family to support her missionary dreams rather than bankroll a wedding. She took the message of Jesus to Japan and stayed there through the terrifying years of World War II. Imprisoned and tortured, she shared her daily bowl of rice with fellow prisoners weaker and sicker than she was. I've gone without food, she said, but I've never been hungry. Life is beautiful. Abraham and Moses had passed retirement at age, at least by 21st century standards, when God called them to further service. Despite the hardships and disappointments they encountered, we remember them for their faithful partnership with God. Life is beautiful. Esther, having become a queen of Persia, could have forgotten her oppressed Jewish people and lived a life of ease. But she had been elevated to a place of honor in the kingdom for a godly purpose, a purpose that she was determined to fulfill regardless of personal risk. She was beautiful, and so was her life. A national magazine cover pictured a refugee mother fleeing Kosovo, clutching her suckling baby to her breast. On the mother's face was written pain, anguish, and even terror. But when the blanket was pulled back, the baby's face was a picture of peace, contentment, security, and hope. Even in the midst of terror, life is beautiful. Have you suffered unbearable loss? Has life become so ugly you can hardly face it? Then he finishes his essay with this in big bold letters. Your life may not always be pretty, but it can always be beautiful. And this is one of those that I saved. I thought was especially good that he had done and sent out. And one of the things that I reflected on as I looked at this and reread it is that I've lived in several parts of Texas. And I know that a lot of times when people think of West Texas, sometimes they don't think of the most beautiful place. And maybe all you West Texas folks that are listening to me don't appreciate that statement, but hang on. We lived out there. And, you know, I have never seen as beautiful as sunsets anywhere else that I've lived as I have out in West Texas. Some of the sunsets there truly taught me about the beauty of God's creation. When we lived in East Texas, you had lots of trees and there was more rain, so lots of things tended to stay green and beautiful. And see, the thing was, you didn't get to see the sunsets because we were in the middle of the forest. I didn't get to see sunsets there. But you know what? Even it had its own beauty. And what I have found the most beautiful is the people everywhere I have lived. Our lives have always involved the church, and in my opinion, if your life is involved with the church, you cannot help but realize the beauty that is to be found everywhere where you find those who love God. You see, finding beauty is about what you are looking for. See, if you're hard to please and picky and grumpy, you will only find ugliness, because the reality is that's what's inside you. You see, if you want to see beauty, you can see that too. Jesus could take something ugly like the cross and make it beautiful because he had the Father. And you can do the same. Is there ugliness in this world? Absolutely. And we should never ignore it, and we should be ready to call it for what it is. But if that is all you see is the ugliness, I worry for you, because that probably means there's a great darkness in you. There is beauty, and we also need to see it and call it what it is. It's a simple illustration. Ever go out to eat with someone and all they can do is complain? Even the food is not good enough for them. They complain about it. That person cannot see the simple beauty in a meal that they were able to purchase. In other words, someone else cooked it for them. They have the money to be able to buy it. They have the ability to be able to go out and eat, and they are not going to starve. But yet all they can do is sit there and complain and pick at their food. It's sad, isn't it? We do not ever need to forget that there is ugliness in this world, but we also need to remember that there is beauty. I also think it's important in life that we create beauty. And just a simple illustration of this, and I'll try to see if I can edit in a picture. Over by the pizza place, there's a power pole. I don't know, it's about 15, 20 feet from the door entrance. When we first bought the place, all that was growing around it, in other words, it's in the ground, it's surrounded by concrete, and there's about a square, I don't know, there's a little bit of dirt around it. In other words, they poured concrete around it and left some edging there, or some extra space where there's dirt. And all that was growing in there was a bunch of stickers. And I can remember that Kelly saw that, and one of the first things she had to do was tear those stickers out. And she dug out the dirt and she put in some fresh dirt, and she planted in there, I believe it's rosemary. That rosemary has just taken off and grown. I don't know if you ever walk around this town here in Covington, but if you do sometime, stop by that power pole that is right there by the pizza place, and for a moment reach down and just run your fingers through that rosemary and then smell your fingers. And it just reminds me that even something that can be as ugly as a pole sticking out of the ground, especially a utility pole with a bunch of stickers growing around it, if you're willing to do it, you can even see that somehow that could be beautiful also. Yes, is there ugliness? Is there ugliness in the world? Yes, there is. There's also beauty. We need to learn to see it, and when possible, we need to learn to create it. Thank you.
Let us break bread together.